Hey all! I hope you're having a great week and have been catching up on some binge watching of our older vids. Today we have a treat for the folks who were around back in the 70s. Those were the days of things like funky clothing and fashion, cool cars and music that was sometimes great and sometimes, not so much. If you were a kid like me, you probably remember things like the Incredible Hulk, watching the Dukes of Hazzard and of course watching the antics of Evel Knieval. Robert Craig Knieval, who later became known to the world by his stage name, Evel Knieval, came roaring into the world on October 17, 1938 in Butte, Montana. He was the oldest of the two children of Robert and Anne Marie Keogh Knieval. His parents divorced in 1939 after the birth of his younger brother Nicholas. Both his mother and father decided to leave the kids in the care of Robert's parents and leave Montana and never looked back. His grandparents did the best they could to raise the boys and loved them as if they were their own. Sometime around the years 46 or 47, they decided to take the boys to the Jwa Chitwood thrill show, which would change the life of young Evel forever. It was a defining moment in his life that made him want to become a daredevil American badass that he eventually ended up becoming later in life. From the moment he saw a motorcycle, the young boy was hooked for life. After leaving high school in 10th grade, he took a job in the copper mines as a diamond drill operator with the Anaconda Mining Company. Although that was his job, his passion was riding his motorcycle. He was promoted to surface duty where he drove a large earth mover, but was fired shortly after getting the promotion for making his earth mover do a motorcycle type wheelie and accidentally drove it into Butte's main power line, leaving the city without electricity for several hours. Talk about a major oopsie! His wild and crazy ways wouldn't stop anytime soon. Just a short time later, he ended up in a local jail, and this is when his idea to become a performer clicked. He had been sharing a cell with another local misfit, a man named William Nawful, who had the nickname Awful Nawful. This led to Knieval being referred to as Evel Knieval. With his love of raising hell and riding his bike, his memories of being 8 and going to see the thrill show, and now his new name. It all just clicked. He knew what he wanted to do and he decided to make it a reality. He entered everything he could think of to get attention for himself, ranging from rodeos to ski jumping. He even did a stint in the army and got out and married his first wife, a beautiful woman by the name of Linda Joan Bork. Not long after getting married, Knieval started the Butte Bombers, a semi-pro hockey team, and not long after that, he became a dad for the first time. Raising kids isn't cheap, and Evel found this out the hard way. Desperate to earn money for his budding family, he started a hunting guide service called the Schuylkill Guide Service. That led to him learning about the culling of elk in Yellowstone and decided to hitchhike from Butte to Washington, D.C. in December 1961 to raise awareness and to have the elk relocated to areas where hunting was permitted. When he got home, he joined the local motocross circuit, which led to his first accident. He ended up breaking his collarbone and shoulder, but it would be far from his last. By the end of his career, he'd broken nearly every bone that he could possibly break, and many at least twice, sometimes more. He still couldn't quite figure out how to make a decent living out of it, yet that is, not bringing home quite enough to feed his family and the doctors telling him no riding for 6 months, Evel took an unexpected job, one of an insurance salesman. They say everything happens for a reason, and maybe that was the case here. While there, he was managed by a man named W. Clement Stone. Stone suggested that Knieval read Success Through a Positive Mental Attitude, a book that Stone wrote with Napoleon Hill. Evel went on to say that much of his later success was due to Stone and his book. What was funny about this though was, what happened while he was working for Stone. Evel went to a local mental hospital and had written more life insurance policies in a day than anyone ever had. He'd broken the record for policy sales. He told the company that he would even break that record if they would make him vice president after doing so. Unfortunately for them, they didn't think he had what it took. What Evel lacked in formal education though, he more than made up for with ambition and self-drive. They didn't see it, so he quit and moved to Moses Lake, Washington. There he took a job selling Honda motorcycles. Just like the drive he had selling insurance, he had the same thing selling Hondas. He decided to mull over the idea of stunt shows and theatrics and decided to jump his Honda over an enclosure of cougars and snakes. No, not that kind of cougars, although that would have been a little more interesting. Anywho, it didn't quite go as planned. The cougars wouldn't even come out of their box and he landed wrong, hitting the box of rattlesnakes. It sent them flying into the crowd, scaring nearly everyone away. Even though it didn't in the way he wanted, it did get a huge reaction and people talking, which was the plan all along. It wasn't long until Evel Knieval, the one everyone knew, was born as a national performer and he was well on his way to superstardom. Sometimes the jumps and stunts would work, other times, not so much, but you have to admit, this guy had balls the size of cannonballs to do what he was doing. There was one problem though: even though he was slowly perfecting his art, there wasn't a lot of fans in the stands to show for it, which meant money was really tight. Evel was well known from the beginning for being a bit of a con man, or someone who found ways of doing things that most wouldn't have thought of doing, and that's exactly how he got his big break. Back in those days, they didn't have the internet or millions of social media sites. They have 3 or 4 television networks that everyone watched. You had NBC, CBS and ABC. ABC had a sports show called Wide World of Sports. Evel knew the biggest motorcycle race at the time was coming up at Ascot Speedway and talked his way into opening the show with one of his jumps. It was a huge success for him, so much so that people all around the world were now talking about him, and barely anyone could even tell you who won the race that day, which was Skip Van Leeuwen. Remember when we said he could be a bit of a con artist at times? His next stunt was a comical but great example of that. He had driven by Caesar's Palace in Las Vegas when he saw the towering fountains and decided he wanted to try to jump them as his next stunt, but he knew permission would be hard to get. He called every TV and newspaper reporter he could think of, telling them that the event was already set up for that weekend. The palace didn't know that though. When a flood of reporters started calling and asking about the big event, Caesar's Palace almost had to say yes at this point. The show was on, but didn't go very well. He misjudged his landing and had a terrible crash. Although his injuries were horrible and the accident itself was brutal, they decided to make a bigger story of it than it actually was, telling reporters that he was fighting hard for his life and was in a coma. Again, it worked like a charm. He was national news once again. Evel was a very conflicted type of hero for the youth of the late 60s and 70s. He adopted a look that was similar to Elvis Presley, who was another major musical icon of the time. He adopted the colors red, white and blue because of his love of America. He loved his country, and loved signing autographs and meeting his adoring fans, but he wasn't always the man that many thought he was. When George Hamilton approached him about portraying him in a movie, he found that out. He literally stuck a gun to George's head and made him read the script in front of him. Although he got the part, Evel himself hated his portrayal of him. It still caused Evel to gain millions more fans and made him obscene amounts of money that bought him everything money could buy, ranging from fancy clothing, luxury boats, cars, homes and even his own jet. Evel loved spending money almost as much as he loved being famous. Besides, he deserved it after all his injuries. With fame and fortune there came an even bigger shift in his own personal persona. With respect to his family, we'll tread carefully about how we say what's next. He forgot that he was married and became a full-blown womanizer, which had to have hurt Linda, his wife and mother of his kids. Not only was he angering his wife and kids, he had a little scrape with the motorcycle gang, the Hells Angels. To put it bluntly, he was becoming an asshole. By 71, he wanted to jump the Grand Canyon. The US government wouldn't allow it, so he did the next best thing. He had a rocket vehicle made and decided to jump it from the Snake Mountain Canyon in Idaho. He didn't die or get injured, but it was a failure. He managed to escape it by a parachute, and the rocket itself was crashed into the bottom of the river. The entire time, both before and after, he was an absolute jerk to everyone around him, even yelling at the press and attacking them. He had another horrific crash not long after at Wembley Stadium in London, where he tried to jump 15 double-decker buses and crashed in front of 90,000 people. He broke pelvis but still managed to get up and announce his retirement. Afterwards, Knieval addressed the audience and announced his retirement by saying, "Ladies and gentlemen of this wonderful country, I've got to tell you that you are the last people in the world who will ever see me jump. Because I will never, ever jump again. I'm through." Evel then walked off the Wembley pitch stating, "I came in walking. I went out walking." After healing up though, he decided he was too young to retire and made another jump at Kings Island near Cincinnati, Ohio. This time he made it without crashing. He set a record that day that lasted nearly 24 years until Bubba Blackwell broke it. On January 31, 1977, tragedy would strike again. He was set to jump a tank of live sharks to promote the new Steven Spielberg movie Jaws. While practicing for the jump, he landed wrong and crashed into the cameraman on duty that day, injuring him severely. Although he had a reputation for being an absolute ass to the press in the past, he felt really bad about what had happened to this one, a man named Thomas Guerin. Evel was afraid his injuries would be permanent, but thankfully they weren't. He went on to heal up fine. Finally, Knieval retired from major performances and limited his appearances to smaller venues to help launch Robbie's career. His last stunt show, not including a jump, took place in March of 1980 in Puerto Rico. However, Evel would officially finish his career as a touring companion of Robbie's, limiting his performance to speaking only, rather than stunt riding. His final tour appearance with Robbie was in March 1981 in Hollywood, Florida. Evel was married twice. He and his wife Linda were married for 38 years. During their marriage, the couple had 4 children, 2 boys, Kelly and Robbie, and 2 girls, Tracy and Alicia. After being publicly embarrassed by his cheating and by the way he bullied her, Linda had finally had enough. Linda and Evel separated in the early 1990s and were divorced in 1997 in San Jose, California. Afterwards, he met another woman named Crystal Kennedy. They began dating in '92. They were married by '99 and divorced in 2001. It must have been bad because Crystal had a restraining order put out against him. This must have been a light bulb that went on over his head, because he figured out that being alone, especially when you're getting up there in the years, isn't the best way to live for most. The couple repaired their relationship and it lasted until his death. He died in Clearwater, Florida on November 30th, 2007. He was 69. Before he died, he became a Christian and appeared on Robert H. Schuler's TV show Hour of Power, where he admitted to the world that he believed in Jesus Christ and was then baptized. Knieval's televised testimony triggered mass baptisms at the Crystal Cathedral. Sadly, his son Robbie, who had taken over following in his father's footsteps, also recently passed away on January 13th of 2023 at the age of only 60 years old of pancreatic cancer in Reno, Nevada. Over the years since the beginning of his career, the licensing and trademark of Evel Knieval has brought in staggering amounts of money and probably still does even to this day. It started with toys, board games, posters and t-shirts, and since, there has been everything you could possibly think of, ranging from an actual opera and his name to roller coasters named after him. He was an inspiration to millions of people and still continues to be even to this day. I really hope you liked today's story. I got the idea after my husband was telling me about trying to be like him as a kid and making makeshift ramps to jump after getting an Evel Knieval bike. He ended up breaking his arm and fingers during multiple jumps, so I guess you could say even my man has a little bit of evil in him. Okay, that was kind of a bad joke, but I tried. Anywho, please hit subscribe, like and share. Merch is also below. Till next time.